The best way to get better at programming is to practice. And in this example, we're going to look at how to read in a file and get data from that we can then print out. As always, this sample file is available for download using the link provided below in the description. We'll pause for a couple seconds so you can download it, and then you can follow along with us. All right, so let's get started. You'll see some things are very familiar that we've already kind of put in place. Things like we're importing java.io and we have a buffer reader. Now, right now we have an error on line 23. That's because we can never get to the IO exception because it can never be thrown. That's going to change in just a second as we start to read in the file. So how we're going to do this is we first need to set up our buffer reader. So just like before, we're going to say buffer reader, BR, that's the name of our object, equals new buffer reader. And then it's going to take in a file reader. So I'm going to say new file reader. And with the file reader, we can then provide a file name or we can pass in a file object. We're going to go ahead and pass in a file name. Now, I have a file called data.txt. It's in the download zip. So I'm going to put that in. There's data.txt. Now notice that our IO exception is not, having an error. That's because we can have an error in opening a file. And so that's the reason we have to have that IO exception. What happens if that file was corrupted? That file doesn't exist anymore. You named it wrong, either in your code or the file itself was named wrong. There's a lot of reasons why we can have an IO exception. So opening up a file reader is one of those things. It is a checked exception. We have to have a try catch with it. Now, all we've done here is open up this file for reading. So I'm going to come down here, and after our to-do to read in a line of data, I'm creating a new line. And here I'm going to read in our data. So we have a string called str, and it's simply going to be equal to br.readLine. This is a text line. Text is going into a string, totally acceptable, and it will then output that on line 21. So let's run this real quick. And you can see it prints out this is info read in from a file. That information is nowhere inside of our code if we look through it. But if we come over here to data.txt, you notice we do have that single line of information. And so we read in that file correctly. However, we're not technically done. Now, it should be noted that when our application ends, it should automatically close our buffer reader, but we don't want to rely on that. What happens if this is part of a bigger application? It's always running. We don't want to have a lot of open file handles. This can cause issues. So when we get done reading a file, we need to close it. Now, you might be tempted to close it inside of a try block. However, and this is a big however, what happens if there was an error in reading it? You might say, well, then I'll close this on my catch block. And that causes its own set of issues. Okay, so we need to have a good way of catching this. And the best way is actually to use what's known as a finally block. This is an optional block that goes with our try catch. Here's finally. It's a block structure, so we're going to put it inside braces. And this is anything that we need to do regardless of whether our try was successful or if there was an exception we had to catch. If there is an exception, it goes to the catch, and then it goes to finally. If there's no exception, it goes all the way through a try. It ignores the catches because there was no exception and goes to the finally. So finally gets run no matter what. And I'm going to say br.close. And when I do that, you're going to notice there's an underline there now. Why? Well, this is once again something that you have to put inside of a try catch. You might think, but I'm in a try catch. No, we're outside of the try. So we're going to come up here. Try, br close, catch. This is going to be an IO exception, IOE. And I'm going to have the body for my catch, but I'm not going to do anything with it. Okay, so notice I'm not doing anything with it. The most common thing that we're going to have is we can't close an existing file that wasn't opened. I'm going to run this. And notice it says, hey, you know what? Your local variable may not have been initialized. So this is showing an error that we still have. Now, why would we have this error? We show that it's up here. And you might say, okay, what's going on here? Well, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to say equals null. Now, I know this is a minor thing, making it equal null. Still not technically initialized, but this kind of tricks our compiler into thinking it has. So you notice that now the error's gone away because I said it's equal to null. So this is kind of a little trick that we can give Java. It's still technically not initialized because it was set to null, but it lets us make sure that it's going to allow us to run this code. I'm going to come over here and run this code one more time. You'll see that it runs and we get our data from our file, just as we expected. Hopefully this was a good and simple explanation of how to read in a file using Java. If you liked it and it helped you out, please give the video a like and consider subscribing so you can learn how to get better at programming.